Welcome to the Unwashed Asses, episode 69. Nice. Recorded for Monday, January 7th, 2019. It's the first day of the year, which is wrong. It's the first episode of the year. Which I feel like if you listen to a lot of podcasts, you're going to be getting this message a ton, like, oh, it's our first episode of the year. We all know how this train wreck goes. But yeah, I figure after the existential crisis, let's get the new year started off right. And by started off right, let's not play Debbie Downer, and let's not go into the other typical thing that shows are going to talk about with, oh, well, now we need to talk about resolutions and what are we going to do different for the year, and how are we going to change and make ourselves better. Instead, we're gonna talk about fucking anime and manga and comics and a bunch of other nerdy shit. Oh man, sorry, I've got a massive headache brewing, but that's not what you're here for. Yeah, so New Year's Eve, I was sitting at home because I don't go out. Not exciting. Waiting for the new year to roll around, and was in a, if you listen to the past few episodes, pretty foul mood. So, I was playing Destiny, as I do, and I had been hearing about for months now a show called Goblin Slayer. And as with, most things anime, I guess as I like to do, let's recant. Let's go back. Let's go back into the past. Let's hit 88 miles an hour and talk about how things all got started, because that's super critical to explaining what I'm about to talk about. Spoilers, it's not really. But no, anime is, I feel like it's one of those things that you have a phase for, much like, wearing eyeliner, raging against your parents and the machine, or just like, oh, it's not a phase, mom. I feel that anime is definitely a phase in a large group of young men and ladies, and while some grow out of it, others don't. I was part of the group that kind of grew out of it. I got my first dose of it with Dragon Ball Z when I'd go stay with my great-grandparents growing up. So I'm like 10 years old. We're out in the middle of the country. And Saturday mornings, they would do the run of cartoons. And Dragon Ball Z was always one that would air. And so I definitely got hooked into the... they were on Namek, so it was the Frieza saga at the time. And that's where I got my real first taste. I didn't really get into... the bulk of anime until I guess high school, where I met a group of friends who were really into it, and they had vast collections. It all starts, with Dragon Ball Z, and they're like, oh, well, have you heard about this show, Trigun, or Cowboy Bebop, or Yu Yu Hakusho, or some other ones, Tenchi Muyo. This was the time too when Toonami was coming on Cartoon Network. And so it was always a thing where my sister and I, we would get home from school, and you had a solid from 3 to 4:30, hour and a half of anime. So it'd be things like Sailor Moon, Tenchi Muyo, Gundam Wing, which got me into Gundam and was just utterly fantastic. So my mic is really low. I'm going to get that turned up. That's not important. But anywho, so that was a big part of high school. I was that cringy guy who'd walk around with Dragon Ball Z t-shirts on, and way too much gel in my hair, and everything. Everybody's awkward in high school, unless you're one of the cool kids, and then it evens out because you're awkward now. But college, moved away. Life in the big city. I grew up in towns of 5,000 people or less, and so being transplanted into Chicago, I would go out, but I didn't make a lot of friends. And in hindsight, I realized I had a lot of opportunities to pick up phone numbers and actually meet people and go out and do things. And I was just so socially maladjusted and awkward. It never happened. Um, so I would I would sit at home in my studio apartment, and I was subletting from my uncle. And while he had turned in his cable box, they never turned off the cable itself. So I would watch a lot of Adult Swim at the time, and that's where I really kind of got into the full swing of things, where we would have it was like a solid 2 hour block of programming in the middle of the night, and I was up. So I would just sit and watch on my big tube TV all this great anime. And this is where I fell in love with like Cowboy Bebop. I really gave Trigun a good run. There was like Appleseed. So a lot of really good shows. The Big O. Oh, God, I love the Big O. It's like, imagine Batman with a big robot and a maid. It was fucking stellar. So I really got into it. And as time marches on, because that's what it does, I fell out of it. Kind of like when you have your set of favorite bands and music that you listen to, typically in like high school. Give me a sec here. I got to clock into lunch. You don't really keep listening to new music, or at least I didn't, after that certain phase. Like anything after 2005, 2006, I just kind of fall off the face of the earth. 2003, that's like my sweet spot for music. And so now the music that I did listen to is, or I should say, do listen to, it's on like the classics. It's not on the top 40 stations or what have you. And the same thing kind of happened with anime, where I don't really care for a whole lot of the new stuff. And that's probably due to age, where a lot of anime is geared towards folks in their teenage years going through very specific things, and, you know, like social awkwardness, coming of age, how to talk to boys and or girls. And there's a lot of melodrama, and it's unnecessary. Back in the day, you know, I dug on it, but now it's just annoying and frustrating. It's like, fucking shit, let your balls drop, go talk to the girl, go punch the guy, go do the thing. Instead, we have to waste 4 or 5 episodes while the character is emotionally constipated. So it's frustrating. And as such, I don't really dig it, and most of it does take place in, you know, schools. So it's not my jam. Granted, there have been a few series from time to time that have caught my interest. For the most part, I kind of avoid it. Things like Naruto and Inuyasha and My Hero Academia. It all falls under the same, like, oh, this is meant for children, and I find it annoying. Which makes me feel bad when my friends try to strike up a conversation about it, or they make recommendations. Like, I just don't care. So I do that with I do all that preface or backstory with the preface of just kind of setting up, like, okay, when something catches my eye, I think it's something really special, because otherwise I don't give a shit for the most part. So Goblin Slayer was one of those titles where it had caught my interest, been popping up on, you know, the various different websites I go to, and it was always a thing of like, okay, well, I'll check it out one day. But with most anime, you have to have a subscription to some like Crunchyroll or Funimation service. Otherwise, it's all bootleg shit, which is of questionable quality, or YouTube has it broken up into like 3 episodes, makes up 1 episode, and the audio is weird, or they have it inverted. And I'm very much a purist, so it's aggravating to watch things like that. But I got lucky and went on YouTube, and sure enough, they have the first season actually ended in December. They have everything subtitled up and ready to go, but the dubs, they're only on like episode 9. And so, this is a separate argument, but with anime, I'll watch either sub or dub, but when I've decided on one for a specific show, I have a hard time watching the other version. You know, case in point, it's usually whatever I'm exposed to first. So, like Cowboy Bebop, I watched the English version first, and watching the Japanese voices is just super weird to me. The inverse is true for like Samurai Champloo, where I watched, or actually pirated back in the day, the entire season, and I watched it all in Japanese, and watching it in English is just weird. It's kind of like watching, if you can imagine Mickey Mouse having a gruff voice. It's like, yeah, technically it's correct and it's all right for that culture because that's how they associate it. But it's just weird. It sits wrong and it kind of takes me out of it. So whatever I decide to watch it in, that's what I end up having to watch it all in. So while I could finish the series in Japanese and read subtitles, it's very disorienting. So I'm stuck waiting. But I guess what's kind of interesting is that it ties into other things that I have interest in now. Like we've been playing Dungeons and Dragons with a group, and I've been getting more into like classic fantasy versus, I guess, like high fantasy like Warcraft and sci-fi like Destiny. So it's very traditional, like, oh, we have the fighter, we have the witch, we have priestess, and it covers that. And we have it's funny because when you read the comic version, it's like a character goes up to the guild and they're like filling out their application to join adventuring parties, and in the comic it's literally a D&D character sheet, and not so in the anime. But it's all based on the same concept. And like, okay, we have this party of adventurers, they're going to go out and do these quests, they level up, they learn new spells, much of the way it works in D&D, you can only use so many times a day, and they explain it away very clearly of like, okay, well, they're praying to a god or goddess who imbues and answers their prayer. That's how the spell works. So it's interesting to see how they kind of tie that all together. But there's the rogue character, the Goblin Slayer, who refuses to let the player characters roll for him, and he stands on his own. But while that is an interesting aspect and how it kind of ties into other things, I guess what really caught my attention was this reputation that the show had for being very visceral. Not necessarily violent for the sake of being violent, but it definitely wasn't themed in the same manner as other anime, where we have the titular hero who gets a nosebleed every time he sees a pretty girl, and he has to rise up and fight the evil overlord, and they overcome things with the power of friendship and magic. Like, a lot of those dissolutions are dispelled in the first episode. It's very, very jarring to watch, and I've watched it a few times now, and I'm trying to gauge it as far as, are they being hyper violent and gritty and dark just for the sake of doing it, or are they trying to set the tone for the remainder of the show? Because, I mean, right in the very first episode, we have characters being raped, stabbed in the guts, murdered violently. We have the character Goblin Slayer himself, spoilers, murdering a small nest of goblin babies so they don't grow up into other goblins. And while it does set the tone, like, oh yeah, these goblins are fucking horrific creatures and terrible things happen in this world, it's done so, I don't know, it's kind of like, it's an adult cartoon in the sense of, okay, well, they say fuck and they do, sexual things. It's not meant for children. This is an anime that isn't geared towards the typical, I guess, anime audience. Your teenagers. It's very rough. I'd say be an adult if you're going to watch it, but it loses some of that edginess into later episodes, where it does start to fall prey to anime stereotypes, like, oh yeah, we have the adventuring party and we're gonna do happy little side adventures, like we're gonna make ice cream, and it feels a little bit disjointed. And I understand they're trying to do a character art with the titular hero, but it's awkward at best. And the other jarring thing is that nobody has an actual name. They're all just referred to by their titles, like High Elf Archer and Dwarf Shaman. It's silly. And when you read like the comic, in the back of it, they always have like a little light novel, I guess they call it, where it's written out like a traditional book. And so it'll be like, High Elf Archer talks to Lizard Man whatever. And instead of like Larry talks to Sue, it's weird. And I don't know that it, like, I guess it creates an ambiguity and it works in whatever language. Like, he doesn't have a clearly Western or Eastern name, so everybody can kind of attach themselves to it. But at the same time, it's weird. The anime itself plays with the pronoun game a whole lot, which helps it, but it's still odd. But no. I'm not going to give the link directly, but if you are interested, it's definitely worth a watch. It's one of the better shows that I've seen in a long time. One of the best in regards to anime, especially in the years that I've been trying to find something. I picked up Comixology or Kindle, whichever you do. Has a lot of the like collected volumes. I think they're up to 5 or 6 available in English. There's 8 total, I think, for Japanese, but no, it's good. And the fact that you can watch it for free essentially right now definitely helps. They're short episodes, like 20 minutes a piece. So I was able to really binge everything in that one night, and then the next day I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna buy all the fucking comics and read all those. So it was fun. I'm now like a fan and eagerly awaiting it. So if you like the cartoons with the big eyes and the magic, and reading black and white comics from right to left instead of left to right, definitely Goblin Slayer is worth a shot. But that's gonna wrap it up. We'll be back Wednesday. I'll give you a little tantalizing bit here. It's women who have married ghosts, next on Maury. Otherwise, if you want to write the show with any comments, complaints, criticisms, concerns, or otherwise opinions, theunwashedasses@gmail.com, theunwashedasses@gmail.com. And of course, if you want to support the show, first and foremost, just tell a friend. That's all I ask. Let somebody know they can get it wherever they get podcasts, and I'd be more than happy to have them. Otherwise, if you want to go a step further, $1 a month would be fantastic over at patreon.com/zeroand09, ZEROAND09, and we'll see you next time.